What if I told you that some of the most powerful emperors in history built part of their wealth on bees? Not armies, not trade routes, but the tiny winged workers living in wooden boxes behind monastery walls. This sounds impossible, right? But for over 800 years, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of Rome that refused to die, collected taxes on something most people never think about: beehives. And the monks who tended these bees became some of the most meticulous accountants in medieval Europe. Tonight, we're diving deep into one of history's strangest tax systems. You'll discover why emperors counted bees like treasure, how monks became master record keepers, and the surprising way this tiny industry helped keep an empire alive for 1,000 years after Rome fell. So settle in, and let me tell you the untold story of imperial bees and the monks who made emperors rich. Picture Constantinople in the year 867 AD. While most of Europe struggles in what we call the Dark Ages, this city gleams with marble palaces, bustling harbors, and something remarkable: monasteries that function like ancient corporations. The Monastery of Stoudios alone housed over 300 beehives. 300. That's not a hobby. That's industrial-scale honey production in the 9th century. But here's what will blow your mind. This wasn't unusual. Meet Brother Theodore. He's been keeping bees for 30 years, and he knows something that would make modern entrepreneurs jealous. His bees don't just make honey. They manufacture liquid gold, medicinal compounds, waterproof sealants, and the finest candle wax in the known world. But here's the twist that changes everything. Brother Theodore isn't just a monk. He's an accountant. Every morning he records which hives produced how much, which colonies look healthy, which ones might swarm, because he knows that in 3 months, a very important visitor will arrive. See, the Byzantine Empire discovered something that even modern governments struggle with. How do you tax wealth that literally flies around? How do you count assets that reproduce themselves? The answer was both brilliant and surprisingly simple. But why would the most powerful empire in the medieval world care about something as humble as a beehive? The answer lies in a tax innovation so clever that it survived the fall of Rome itself. Emperor Basil II, the man who crushed the Bulgarian Empire and earned the nickname Bulgar-Slayer, is studying documents that would surprise you. Spread across imperial tables aren't battle plans or diplomatic treaties. They're bee census reports. The Byzantine tax system was centuries ahead of its time. While Western Europe struggled with crude feudalism, Byzantium had developed what we'd recognize today as data-driven taxation. They counted everything: wheat fields, olive trees, fishing boats, pottery wheels, and yes, beehives. Here's why this was revolutionary. A beehive was considered a taxable unit exactly like an acre of farmland. One healthy hive equals 1 tax unit. It didn't matter if you were a monastery, a wealthy landowner, or a humble farmer. If your bees produced honey, the empire wanted its share. But here's the brilliance. They didn't tax the honey directly. They taxed the productive capacity. A strong hive might yield 20 pounds of honey per year, worth about half a gold solidus. The tax? Usually just 1/10 of that value. It was sustainable, predictable, and nearly impossible to evade. The tax collectors weren't harsh enforcers. They were specialist accountants who understood beekeeping. They could spot a healthy colony from across a monastery courtyard. They knew the difference between a productive hive and one that was struggling. This expertise made the system surprisingly fair. And here's what's amazing. The monasteries embraced this system. Why? Because it turned beekeeping from a small-scale operation into something that could generate serious wealth. Monasteries began competing to produce the best honey in the empire. But how did simple monks become the medieval world's most sophisticated beekeeping experts? That story reveals something incredible about human ingenuity. If you could time travel to the library of St. Catherine's Monastery in 1156, you'd discover something shocking. Alongside theological texts and biblical commentaries sit the world's first systematic beekeeping manuals. These weren't just religious men. They were scientific researchers. Brother Nikephoros, writing on Mount Athos, recorded observations that wouldn't look out of place in a modern beekeeping journal. Colonies placed near lavender produce honey with superior healing properties. Those near oak trees show greater resistance to winter mortality. Optimal hive spacing, 6 feet minimum to prevent robbing behavior. But here's what makes this extraordinary. They were creating the world's first agricultural database. Every monastery shared information. Brother Maximos in Constantinople writes to Brother Andreas in Thessalonica, "Tried the new hive design from Mount Athos. Their honey production increased 40% this year." The competition between monasteries was intense but friendly. The monastery of Hosios Lucas boasted honey so pure it looked like liquid crystal. Mount Athos developed hives that survived brutal winters. The monasteries near Trebizond perfected techniques for harvesting without disturbing the colonies. This innovation had an unexpected consequence. Monastery honey became a luxury brand. Wealthy Constantinopolitans would specifically request Mount Athos honey or Stoudios wax, the tax collectors noticed. Premium products meant higher taxable values. But the most remarkable discovery in these monastic records isn't their beekeeping techniques. It's how they handled disasters that would crush modern businesses. When nature and war threatened to destroy everything they'd built, these monks revealed a resilience that kept the empire's tax revenue flowing, even in the darkest times. The spring floods of 1071 were catastrophic. Brother Ioannis at Hosios Lucas watched helplessly as torrential rains drowned 7 of his strongest bee colonies. Similar disasters struck monasteries across Anatolia. Any normal business would collapse, but these weren't normal businesses. Here's what's incredible: the imperial tax system adapted instantly. When assessors arrived and saw the devastation, they didn't demand payment anyway. They restructured the entire regional assessment. 7 colonies lost to flooding appears in official records, with tax obligations adjusted accordingly. But the real shock comes from how monasteries helped each other. When Hosios Lucas lost those colonies, 3 neighboring monasteries immediately sent replacement swarms for free. They treated bee colonies like a shared resource pool across the entire Orthodox network. This cooperation was so systematic the tax collectors learned to track it. They developed rules. Gifted colonies weren't taxed in their new location until they'd produced for a full season. Monasteries rebuilding from disaster got 3-year tax holidays. The system bent but didn't break. Then came the ultimate test, war. When Seljuk armies swept through Anatolia, entire monastic communities fled. Some tried to take their bees with them, constructing portable hives for the journey to safety. Others buried their honey stores and prayed they'd survive to return. The tax records from these war years reveal something beautiful: imperial flexibility. Assessment impossible due to enemy action appears repeatedly. When monasteries returned to rebuild, they found tax collectors ready to help restart their operations, not punish them for missing payments. But perhaps the most surprising survival story comes from the empire's final centuries, when external enemies weren't the only threat. By 1350, the Byzantine Empire controlled little more than Constantinople and a few scattered territories. Italian merchants dominated Mediterranean trade. Ottoman armies pressed against the capital's walls, and the imperial treasury was often empty. Yet in monastery records, something remarkable continues. The same careful beehive counts, season after season. Brother Callistos writes from Mount Athos in 1354, 23 hives survived the winter. Ottoman raiders passed through the valley below but did not disturb our community. The casualness is stunning. Empires are collapsing, but the bees need tending. What's fascinating is how the Ottomans handled this inheritance. When they conquered Byzantine territories, they found a taxation system more sophisticated than their own. Instead of destroying it, they adapted it. Ottoman records show continued beehive taxation using nearly identical methods. The last Byzantine tax collector, Constantine Lascaris, made his final rounds in 1452, just 1 year before Constantinople's fall. His report reads like poetry. The brothers at St. Demetrios maintain 18 healthy colonies. Their honey remains as sweet as in my grandfather's time. He knew he was witnessing history's end, yet he completed his duties with the same professionalism his family had shown for generations. These final records would outlive the empire they documented. Today, these documents are scattered across libraries from Mount Athos to the Vatican. They're not just tax records, they're proof of something profound about human persistence. The story of Byzantine beehive taxation reveals something that goes beyond medieval history. In an age obsessed with disruption and innovation, here's a system that lasted over 800 years by embracing simplicity, fairness, and adaptation. Think about it. While kingdoms rose and fell, while technologies revolutionized human life, the fundamental partnership between monks and bees remained constant. The golden hum that once helped fund imperial armies still echoes in Orthodox monasteries today. But here's the deeper lesson. The most sustainable systems aren't the most complex ones. Byzantine beehive taxation worked because it was simple enough to understand, fair enough to accept, and flexible enough to survive everything history could throw at it. Perhaps that's why this obscure tax system outlasted the empire that created it. In our world of cryptocurrency and algorithmic trading, there's something profound about wealth created by the patient labor of bees, recorded by the careful hands of monks and sustained by the simple rhythms of seasons. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, remember that somewhere in a quiet monastery garden, the descendants of Byzantine bees continue their ancient work. They're creating something more valuable than gold, the sweetness that reminds us why patience and persistence matter more than power. Sweet dreams, and remember to like and subscribe for more hidden histories that will change how you see the world.